shot coming up after this was quite interesting, John, wasn't it? Something to note perhaps for the club players, anybody interested in trying to keep on that black.
Yeah,
keep high on the reds. Make sure you've always got angles into the from around the blue area sometimes, especially those reds that get further away from the black area.
You see here, he could actually play a cannon into the red next to the pink if he was trying to, you know, use a ball as a buffer. But of course, he screws straight into the gap, knowing full well that he's now got the opportunity of 2 reds, which will take him back to the black spot. That was a very clever little shot and well played.
This had to be played very well.
57.
A stun off the side cushion to try and get far enough away from the cushion to make this black a bit easier. He would have probably liked to have been 6 inches further forward, but even so, he kept the momentum of the break going. And now it's getting a bit more difficult, and it's getting harder, less reds on the table, less choices. And this was a very good shot. Once again, getting high up the table to give himself options of then potting reds into corner pockets and coming back down for the black.
That was a lot better shot than it looked, wasn't it? Because he just went slightly up the cue ball and played it like a little power stun and bumped the black in and came through the gap for the red.
Especially as effectively was frame ball as well. And even though he would have been wanting to make the 147, it probably was on his mind, he still had to win the frame, so he couldn't risk any positional shots. And now it's still quite a crowded table now, balls in some respects blocking each other. And so this is where the intelligent positional play comes into play. And John Higgins, quite fortunately, properly found the best red to perhaps pot, that cleared the path for other reds.
Good thing there though, Steve, with that positional shot of course, is he's leaving himself options, isn't he? When he played into that area of the table, he had the red on the left nearest to the pink was a shot he could have taken, or the other one that he has done. So options all the time, more than one red there for him.
Most times you don't want to be straight on a ball. Of course, when you are straight, you only have 2 options: running through, it goes into the pocket, so it's the screw back. And that's why he took a bit of time over this shot. And of course, these 2 reds were open into the middle pocket. And to some degree, that was nice for John Higgins. But still, smooth, controlled cueing. He hasn't changed his cueing one little bit. 1 or 2 backwards and forwards movements. A nice, lazy, slow, controlled pullback. Nice pulls, and then through the ball. Had to avoid Chinesing himself over the red, as it's termed. And still, the problem of those 2 reds by the pink.
Could only really play on the 1 red there, which he's managed to get on. I'm really quite relieved that he wasn't hampered by the red above the cue ball.
At some stage you'd have to use the rest in a break, I suppose, potting balls into each pocket, unless you're Ronnie O'Sullivan and you play left-handed. But these shots in themselves weren't difficult. Nothing too difficult in a lot of these pots, but it's the close cue ball control really that makes this break very, very special.
89.
Now he's come a really good angle on the black, so he has options here once again. What sort of shot he can play.
He was roughly in the same position here, had to screw back, but there may have been a slight angle on this one, and obviously he was hoping to leave himself the right side of the red, the open red, in which to play back for the black, and he overhit this a fraction.
Yeah, I think consciously thinking that the one thing you don't do with that shot is finish short, and then you've got to take the cue ball up in and out of baulk, so slightly overcooked it, but nevertheless it worked out okay because he can play the skew shot in between the pink and black and back off the top cushion.
And that was about the most angled pot he had to play on a red. Just sneaked in, which meant he hit a bit thick, but it came out very nicely.
That was beautifully controlled, wasn't it? I mean, any higher up and, you know, maybe he's got to start screwing back and playing reds in centre pockets, but that was perfect. Nice little stun past the pink.
And mandatory applause there for the 100th break. And now everybody in the room who didn't know before would be able to do the maths and know that there was 147 on.
Making sure he left himself a half ball angle on the black, just to stun this in. And once again, even with this shot, got to make sure you go high up the table, so the final red is once again coming down towards the black.
Of course, the first big problem in making 147 is black to yellow. And if you could choose which colour you played from. You obviously wouldn't choose a black to get on the yellow. So you must leave yourself an angle, and all of a sudden it looked like John Higgins had gone wrong here. But he had just enough angle, and the power run through is a very, very difficult shot indeed. Take a look at that, John. In playing that shot, you had to put a lot more force into the shot. And he actually got a bit of a bounce off of that. But that does happen quite a bit, doesn't it?
Certainly does, and both balls have a tendency to leave the table before they actually make contact, and in some cases they leave the table after contact. It's amazing to see when we slowed it down how high the balls actually do leave the bed of the table.
Look at the excitement there, look at it. Now, this was a slightly more difficult cut than it looked on the television screen.
This is a much better shot than it looked. This is definitely thinner.
Tendency under pressure would be to start to strike the ball too hard to make sure you hit through the ball properly, but that wasn't a bad effort, was it? I mean, you could argue fractionally 6 inches too far, but still that same smooth cue action.
This was a good shot as well, slightly higher on the white to make sure that when he played half a stun there was still enough momentum on the cue ball to come back for the brown.
Brown to blue is always a critical shot. You don't want to leave yourself too much of an angle on the blue if you can help it, but you don't want to screw back too far. He didn't really get into that as well as he possibly might have done, but if he'd have hit it too hard, he would have been the other side of the blue, so had to settle for that position, and this was missable under pressure. Still that smooth cueing.
Just caught the jaw slightly there. He might have had a little second to himself whether it was going towards the pocket, but it went in.
He knew he got it now, I think. After 4 maximums, he knew he was going to make it.
The one thing you don't want to do, of course, is have that horrible thought that you need to make a 140 and do a Ken Doherty and miss the final black. It cost Ken an £80,000 sports car when he did it, so concentrate like mad and knock this straight in. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Deja vu for John Higgins. Last year he did it in exactly the same spot on the table.